righty, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, everyone from far and wide here to the Corning Museum of Glass and our audience here and in-house. You've joined us on a very special live stream. We've got John Sharvin and Minhi, England. Runner-up winners of Blown Away. We've been a very exciting weekend with them. They made a lot of beautiful product for our store throughout the weekend, and now we are for the shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass, and now we are well underway on a beautiful sculpture. Now this sculpture has a lot of parts, a lot of pieces when it comes together, so we did start a little earlier today. All morning we've been making parts and pieces for this assemblage, and now we are working on the main body of this piece. So to catch everybody up, this is the piece. You can see on the screen. I'll also hold a picture up for those of you who are here in-house. We've got this lovely spaceship. It's got some flowers in there and some, of course, a lot of space junk all over the piece itself. So we've already made a lot of these parts, and they are all sitting safe, warm, and happy in our oven, and we're going to be assembling them all together here in front of the audience. So back to our team here. We got Katie also on the assist. She's going to be doing some reheats here to start out. Chris is going to be in charge of the oven. He is our garage extraordinaire here today. We got lots of parts that are going to be brought into this assemblage, so he's going to be heading that up. My name's Helen. I'm on the microphone, so here to answer questions, and I'll be jumping in as needed to assist with this assemblage as well. So if you have any questions, whether they're online or in person, we also have a moderator here to be able to assist us in answering into those online questions that you might have. But let's get another big round of applause for the team. Everybody welcoming in together. Thanks so much for tuning in with us today. So to get started, we've already inflated a big round bubble out of glass. We layered up and started with a beautiful robin's egg blue on the inside of that bubble, and then the outside has been coated with lots of gray powders. So now we're going to start breaking this bubble up into the different components of this piece. Now this fun assemblage has two different windows in it, and we made those windows already. They're to a certain size, and they are in our oven. So now John is cutting away some of the lip that would be for where this first window is going to be attached. So we can cut glass as long as it's hot. It's a super awkward angle that he's grabbing in there. But what a beautiful job. Nice and even all the way around. Well done. Well done. Now this piece, this live stream is inspired by the NASA mission that was launched in 2015 with the first successful flower blossom to happen in space. So as a precursor, I imagine, to where we're going to travel through space, need to growing our own food and everything. So this is a nod to that successful first endeavor with plant life in space. So we've got our first hole. We're going to be using a lot of torches here for this project. Torches allow us to spot heat very specific areas. So you can see John now really warming up that lip and opening. And this is a really great way of being able to create just the right orifice size that we need without disturbing that beautiful round bubble that's our spaceship. If we tried to heat everything all at once, we'd most likely collapse some of that big round bubble. So really important to be able to keep things at just the right temperature as you're working. There's a lot of precursor setup and planning that went into this, and I will say I've been very impressed with how organized these two are. They came in this morning with a big laundry list of specific items that we needed to make, each one of them describing which colors we would use, how many rolls of colors that we needed for each application, how many parts they needed in total, and we were able to accomplish most of those parts throughout our morning session. So this project you'll be seeing within only the last 2 hours of its assemblage, but really it is a whole day's worth of work and almost 2 or 3 days worth of planning to go into making this beautiful, successful piece. So for those of you who are not familiar with glass as a process, I'm just going to introduce a few things about our shop. We have our furnace here that melts all clear molten glass at a temperature of 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 1150 Celsius. So at that temperature, our glass stays hot and soft and malleable, so we can pull out whatever amount of glass we need at the time that we need it. We're also using our reheating chambers. We've got 2 of them today. We've got the large one that Katie's reheating. That's what you see on the screen right now. We've got a really great view inside of that reheating chamber. And then we also have a small one that we can use to reheat all these parts. So here we're going to do our first price check is what we call it. We're not sticking them together, but we're just making sure that both the opening and that piece are going to match up beautifully in that connection. He's already added a wrap of color around the edge of this clear glass dome so that it looks like the metal components that where the window would kind of be stuck into the side of the spaceship. So already thinking through what all these parts are going to look like and how they're going to come together. You can see that beautiful glow of the glass where we're seeing the most heat in that project. And that's where the torch really is going to come in helpful for this. Oh, we're getting a great view of the little window there. Chris is getting everything ready, cutting down the connection a little tighter, making sure that everything is ready to attach and break free really easily. There's going to be a lot of coordination happening to make this successful here today. And John's kind of the one calling the shots. So notifying Chris that, okay, we're almost ready. I'm going to get a torch and we're going to go for a flash. There's all these terms that we all need to be on the same page with so that we get exactly the right timing when you start to assemble a piece like this. If Chris were to bring something over at the wrong temperature, the wrong timing, they might not bond together properly, or they might not be the right size or thicknesses. So Katie goes for a quick, short heat called a flash. That's kind of code word for don't get it moving, just keep it hot enough to keep it from cracking. So lining it right up, sticking it right on, looks like a really nice fit. Breaking it free, beautiful job. And I'm just throwing it out there, folks. You feel free to give that love and enthusiasm anytime you feel it, all right? Always makes the day go a little bit nicer when we know you're having fun as well. So this is going to be a window, and what's really beautiful about this design is that there's going to be a lot of things hidden inside of this. So coming up with these 2 different window sizes is a great way to give the viewer a good look to the inside and all those flowers and components that are going to be put together. But by putting that cap back on, that gave us the ability to seal this together again. So they just added a little more air pressure to keep things, everything nice and round. Well, we want to make sure each part, as they go and assemble together, are well contacted and nice and strong in that bond. If you put 2 cool pieces of glass together, they might stick, but they'll have a memory where those 2 things came together. And that's a potential area where the glass could break eventually. So we want to make sure that those connections are really true and nice and hot so that we have 2 pieces of glass bonded together, essentially creating one. We use that temporary connection in a lot of applications, like the transfer, the pickup, the temporary contact of things. But for the most part, all these parts we want to have nice and hot. We can use a lot of tools Well, we really have to use a lot of tools to shape glass since it's a material at over 2,000 degrees. We can't really hold on to it or touch it. So we have to use a lot of tools, and these little hand pads, these are hand tags rather, taglios, are really popular carving tools. So a lot of the tools that are on the bench that we're working, those are all handmade as well. There's not a huge demand for glassmaking tools in general, so a lot of them are handmade artworks in their own right. And so I see a couple different makers in that pile of tools that John and Minhi have brought with them today. And especially as sculptors, you tend to make a lot of your own tools. You kind of find and augment existing objects because maybe there's a certain curve that you want to carve in or a certain texture that you want to add. So you just go to the hardware store, you go to the restore, you go to the kitchen store, and you start to look at objects. And you look at, well, this meat tenderizer has a really great pattern. I could maybe use that. Earlier, John was using a pasta roller with the little wiggled edge to be able to cut in some details on the side of the conduit boxes that we're adding to the surface. All the little rivets on the sides of all these windows and everything. These are just little copper pipes that he used to heat up the area and touch with that copper pipe, and it creates this little ring with a little divot in the middle. It kind of looks like a rivet. So you're only limited by your own creativity when you start to look through forms like that. Do you want a little more door, Katie, or are you doing all right? Okay. So now that they've got the rest of this all in place, now we want to get rid of that little handle that we added just to help carry that little window to its final position. So heating up just the very tippy tip and just pulling that glass away. Now, one really lovely aspect of glass is that it does want to round up when it gets hot. So if you have a sharp spot or a little texture or detail that you really don't want that texture or detail, you can use that torch to spot heat that specific area. As the glass gets hot, it starts to ball up and round up and soften all those hard edges, and so you can end up smoothing out any of that irregular texture. But that's also the risk you take when you start overheating your glass. So it'll be a delicate balance for Katie, keeping things warm enough and making sure that they're not moving, making sure they're not cracking, and finding just that Goldilocks temperature. So you're going to blow this out just a little bit. Now, we just had a fantastic weekend with these two. On Saturday, John Sharvin made a whole series of cups that we sell in our shop, and they're really amazing. They've got graphite carved molds that he's using for the production of these cups. And I know that we have I was just looking on our online catalog. There's a lot of them online for sale. So if you're tuning in from far and wide, get onto the internet on a little separate window and check out the work of these two on our online shop resource. But it's really beautiful and unusual cups that he made. And those will eventually be, again, for sale, the ones that we made this weekend, but also all the product line that we already carry in the store. And then Minhi spent Sunday making some of her beautiful peonies. She's got these lovely flowers. She's a very gifted sculptor and works a lot with flowers in her personal work. And so has a series of peonies. There's a mirrorized, I can't remember what the mirrorized color. What's the name of the mirrorized flower that she has? Do you remember? I'm asking our shops person. I completely forgot. But we've got 3 different versions of flowers that are just gorgeous. You definitely want to check those out. And we made a few new versions with some experimental colors over the weekend. So those are going to be available in the shops for sale as well. Now we're drilling a hole in the very bottom of this bubble and using what we call a tungsten rod to do so. Now tungsten is kind of a magic metal that doesn't want to stick to glass, so we can use it, get it really hot, and just drill right through the product. Introspective bloom is the name of the flowers with these beautiful mirrorized centers, so you can kind of see yourself reflected in the center of those flowers. Gorgeous in person, but you can certainly see them, a nice image of them I saw online, that you can check those out. So now that we've got the hole drilled in the bottom, the reason we've drilled a hole is because Chris, which I think we just saw on the camera there, he is making what we call a blow punty. Now, standard punties are usually gathered up a little bit of glass on a solid iron, made it into a little Q-tip shape, and then you just stick it right to the bottom of your piece. Then when you break your piece away from the original blowpipe, then it's reattached to that second iron. But we want the ability to continue to add air into this form as we make it. So by drilling a hole in the bottom, and then with Chris making what we call that blow punty, it's essentially like a donut on the end of the iron. So the iron has the hole all the way through and available. If we blow air, it'll still go through the end of that iron. So when we marry these two pieces together, that means if we do everything right, we'll have air being able to be added by this secondary pipe or that we're using as a punty. Chris is cooling down that pipe, which is a really nice thing to do before you start to transfer over to a big heavy piece. These pipes are made of stainless steel. In general, they do dissipate their heat nicely. They don't stay that hot. But you want to be able to hold the weight of this glass as close to the weight of the glass as possible for ergonomic sake. So we just cool those pipes so that it gives us a few extra inches, which can make it feel a lot less heavy. Lining it right up. Often putting in a whole nother jack line or constriction. That way we can try to get this to remove at the jack line rather than kind of breaking away where that punty is connected. We want to keep it nice and strongly connected. So the weakest spot is where we want it to break. So we want that new line, not the connection to the piece. And later on, when we're finished with this whole project, then we'll be able to cold work that little nub back down to smooth and hide that punty connection. So a little water on the jack line and a light little tap is all it should take to break that free. Beautiful job. Pro. Now, someone asked earlier, how do we tell how thick glass is as we're inflating it? And one thing that we can do is look at the residual glass on the end of that moil, the leftover glass on the pipe itself, and that kind of shows us a little bit of the representative of how thick the walls are on the bubble that we just broke off. So when they go to break it, Minnie was like, oh, give me a look. Give me a real quick look at that moil. And that just gives her a little bit more information about the thickness that they're playing with. We want to have plenty of structure on this because we got lots of parts and pieces that are going inside, going outside, and we need to be able to transfer this once again to another punty to be able to put on some additional parts. So if we made this bubble too thin, it'd be really hard to manage all those structures. So making sure everything is just right is really important. But now we can start to heat up the or I think that's going to be kind of the opening. We've got the side window. Now we're going to be working on the opening for this big window that's going to be the main feature. Once we have the hole, we need to fill it with all the flowers and everything that they've made, and then we'll cap it very similarly to what we did that little window with a pre-made big window that we have in our garage. So as they're warming things up, do we have any questions, any curiosities out here in the audience, or of course online as well? Feel free to send them some questions. Yes. Yeah, you're noticing that we're using paddles, but sometimes they're not touching anything. So what are we doing? Well, what we're trying to do is protect each other. So if you're using a wood paddle, you can use that as a shaping tool, absolutely. Wood is a really great kind of inert material that's not going to be hot, not going to be cold, so it's not going to shock the glass. If it has to be really hot glass, we might put water on that paddle to get the steam forming, keeping it from sticking and catching on fire. But mostly right now, we're just shielding Minhi's fingers from the intense heat of that material. So we can use those as like little walls to protect us from the radiant heat. When we come from our furnace, our glass is at 2,000 degrees. When we have it down to about 1,000 degrees, the glass is rigid. So if we're forming something, we're well above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you go into your kitchen and you're making cookies and you're pulling out a pan of cookies, that's like 350, 375. And you know what, that fluff of heat, if you get your face in there too quickly and you open the door and you lose all your nose hairs, well, that same kind of thing can happen with glass makers as well. So we think a lot about radiant heat. Even if you're kind of cutting in a jack line and performing certain moves, instead of being right above the piece where all the radiant heat is planking on you, you can just move your hand back a little bit, work from behind a little bit, and kind of get yourself out of that radiant heat. We do the same thing as we're heating with our gathering and everything that we do. We're thinking about where that radiant heat will come into play. Great question. Was there any other questions? Okay. So this is a Sophietta tool. This is essentially a replacement blowpipe. So with the cone, it will seal up different orifice sizes, and then you can add more air pressure. Now you might remember we had poked a hole in it. There was basically an opening all the way through. So if she tried to use that Sophietta to inflate, all the air would just go out the other end. So they asked somebody to cap it. That just means put your thumb over the far end of that pipe so that you're trapping that pressure inside. All right, so I saw the calipers come back out. We need to make sure that this opening is going to be big enough to fit all of our pieces inside. So we took measurements off of the pieces that we want to fit inside, and of course that window needs to also match. So right now the hole's kind of small, so we need to widen that up. They may trim it like they did the first window, or they might just get it hot and keep letting it expand and push it open into that nice round size. Looks like we're grabbing a pair of Parchovies, and these are generally wided bladed jacks made either with wood or with graphite. And today it looks like we're using the graphite. Being nice, wide, broad tools, they don't tend to dig into the surface like our pointy jacks might. Look at that multitasking, holding the paddle, holding the calipers. Nice, slowly turning. They were commenting earlier about assembling things like this, and they typically, when they've done assemblages together, it's usually just the two of them and one hole to reheat out of, and maybe one little garage to play with. So coming here to the Corning Museum of Glass, of course, we have a state-of-the-art facility with all the bells and whistles, all the toys, the extra ovens, the extra hands. And so it really just makes that process a lot more comfortable, a lot less stress to be able to assemble a much bigger team. And, of course, an experienced team like Katie and Chris. Those are good hands to have on the assist. But we feature a lot of guest artists here at the Corning Museum of Glass, not only on our demonstration stage here, but we also have a mobile unit that travels around the country. Last year traveled over 8,000 miles and went to multiple venues hosting guest artists and demonstrating for the public. The Glass Art Society is coming up here this spring. That's a conference that happens every year in different cities, and this year will be in Detroit. And so we're heading out there and going to be hosting a lot of visiting artists there at the GAS conference as well. There we go. Looks like we got just the right size. Now as we go back into this furnace, you might think it's just one big hot box, but it is a tool in its own right. There is flame coming in very specific places, one or two. This particular unit has 2 flames. And the front of the furnace also has a retention ring and doors that are opening and closing to accommodate larger and smaller work. So that means that we can kind of position our glass in certain places in that hole and get different effects. So if we want to tuck it in really close to the flame and kind of get a little extra heat in that area, Chris is backed way out and only heating the very lip of that piece so that we can only get the lip hot enough. But the entire time, no matter where we're heating on that piece, we need to make sure nothing gets too cold. So you'll also see Chris going all the way in, doing what we call a flash heat. Flash heats just balance out your temperatures, keeping everything warm enough. And then you can concentrate on making changes where you put the most heat. So typically when you go to transfer, when you're punting, when you're positioning these sculptures or these blown objects, you're thinking about how it's going to be easiest to heat the area that you want. So right now, whatever's furthest away from you typically is easiest to get the hottest, because you can flash all the way in, then back out, heat what's furthest away from you, and then go in for a flash. Where it would be really hard to keep the lip a little colder and build all your heat what's close to you. So most of the time, that's one of the reasons that you are flipping a piece one direction or another, just changing its position to be able to change its access to heat within that tool. With that in mind, we're just doing a little heat maintenance while we allow that bubble to cool down a little bit. We got the right size now. There's a lot of steps along the way that we need to kind of check in with each other and make sure that everything's coming together as they expected or adjust as needed. So you'll often see a lot of powwow happening around that hot bench. All right, so we had a question online about how long these folks have been working with glass. So John Sharvin is an artist that's living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working primarily in glass and mixed media. Started glass in 2008 at the Ohio State University. Graduated in 2012 with a BFA in glass. He has exhibited at several galleries, including the Fuller Craft Museum, Lake Erie Art Museum, and Hawk Galleries. His work has been published in New Glass Review, which is a yearly publication through the Corning Museum of Glass, a great feature of what's happening in glass of that particular year, and also Dwell Magazine, which is a lovely design magazine. John likes to utilize digital fabrication techniques such as 3D printing and CNC milling to create unique and unexpected forms in glass. And that's where some of that technical knowledge comes in for those beautiful cups and tumblers that he's made for the shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass. They're all using these handmade custom graphite molds that he designed and manufactured or created right there in Pittsburgh. But originally from Columbus, Ohio. I'm really excited to have John join us here at the Corning Museum of Glass. Now Minhi, I'm going to get Minhi's bio out here. Now Now, Minhi, she's settled in Seattle-based artist, working primarily in glass and metal. Earned her BFA from Alfred University, one of our local universities, only about an hour away from here. We get a lot of glass blowers coming to us from there. And where she fell in love with glass and shifted her 2D practice to sculpture. After graduating in 2010, Minhi has been working as a professional glassblower and designer at numerous studios throughout the greater Seattle area. I know I met Minhi at Pilchuck Glass School, which is a fantastic all glass-related summer camp for adults, pretty much. But it's a great place to take classes and workshops, and a lot of folks come through Pilchuck, rather. Pinland's another great one, but it's more mixed media. And of course, I got to plug Corning Museum of Glass Studios, being one of the best places to come and take classes and workshops. Pilchuck is really more of a private, it is open to the public, but they have very specific weeks that they have classes. But here at Corning, we offer classes and workshops year-round, anywhere from a very short experience with the assistance of a professional to a more in-depth 1 week, 2 week classes or intensives that last 1 night a week for 10 weeks or such. So keep an eye on future classes and workshops that we have on our website. And we might see one of these two coming to teach here eventually. But it looks like Katie's just doing a little babysitting now. We've got our beautiful, I can see that blue coming through to the inside so nicely. We've got our nice window. We've got our opening. And now we're pulling out one of the inserts. So Chris has pulled out the stem for what will be our flower assemblage. We've got 2 flowers and a little bud, and we have all of these leaves. So these are going to be attached to the inside of this form. We'll go for a price check here. Looks like an awful tight fit. Can I move this one? Okay. All right, so Chris did a price check, and he said it was a little tight. So they're going to adjust those leaves just a little bit to make sure that they'll fit on the inside of that hole. Yep. Now, when we go to assemble this together, it will end up being really hot at the bottom of it. We want this to not be moving and flopping around. We want it pretty structural, but we need enough heat where the contacts are going to come together to be a strong bond. So even if it's a tight fit and we were to barely grace along the side, it does run the risk of sticking together. So that's what we want to avoid. Threading that needle really tightly, but also not really putting ourselves in more peril than we need to be to make this assembly happen. So John's just getting all of his tools organized while Chris cuts down those leaves just a little bit. Probably just enough to compress it just a little bit to make it fit a little tighter. So you can see how Chris is using that torch to get the very tip of that flower stem nice and hot. Now we also have, I think we don't want to touch it to the very bottom because of the hole that's in there. Doing some gloves. It's all right. All right, good assemblage. Tight fit, tight fit. Beautiful. So now we've got the stem in there. Now we need to put our flowers onto that stem as well. So since that connection was so warm where we touched it, it's still got a little flexibility. So they can reach back in there and make sure that the positioning of that stem is in just the right place. Yeah, fit like a glove. Perfect. All right, so now we need to start adding our flowers to this. And when we've been pulling things out of the garage, there's a lot of kind of maintenance that happens when you go to pull things out of that garage. Since they're keeping everything safe, warm, and happy as the babysitter, we need to get them ready to be as hot as possible without melting and sticking or breaking. So we load things either by grabbing them with a punty, maybe re-puntying it out of the furnace, or we can bring them over on paddles. So I heard Chris tell me, oh, we've got a paddle in there. We've got both flowers put onto that paddle, ready to come out, give it a little flash, so then they can choose which flower they want to grab. They might not end up using all 3 flowers, they said. That's part of that. We've never made it before. We got a game plan, but when it starts to come together, you start to see those visuals and maybe can make those changes as you go along for aesthetic reasons. Oh, great shot there, Brad. You can see right inside there. Got Brad and Jason on the cameras here today doing a fantastic job. Lexus up in the booth making it all happen for us. And remember that all of this will end up on our YouTube channel eventually as well. So if you kind of missed a moment and you want to re-watch it, it'll take about a week for us to get all the post-production done and back up. And we often take a good picture, document the final object, and include that in the final bit of the live stream. We'll also post pictures on our social media as they come along, and all the things come out of the oven. But it looks like we're just going to do just a little bit of maintenance here. And we've got these really fun inside sculpting tools. A lot of sculpture is traditionally just done from the outside, but we've started to use inside sculpting techniques, and it's really opened up a lot of possibility with the way that people are making glass these days. But these tools are various spheres, pokey things, ridges. There's lots of different configurations, and they're all on these long curved handles. So you open up the end of a bubble and you can spot heat with that torch, go in from the inside and push from the inside to get like a nose defined, or the cheeks pushed out on a face, or recentering the window on a spaceship. There's lots of different things you can do with those inside sculpting tools. And those same tools could, of course, be used on the outside as well. We saw when John was making his the engines, or the things at the bottom of this sculpture, he was using the same inside tool just to make a nice indent in the outside of an object as well. So Chris is just... Since John's going to be grabbing hold of this glass, he also wants to warm up the tweezers. Do you want me on the punny? And they stick that flower right onto the top. Beautiful. So they're just discussing whether they think they can fit another flower inside of there. Timing is so critical on maneuvers like this. You got to have your flat glass flower just the right temperature. You got to have the piece in just the right temperature so it's not moving or not getting too cold. You got to make sure that the connection inside that they're going to stick the flower to is just the right temperature. Good thing we got nice long tweezers. You can put that flower right in there. Super tweezers. It's like playing the game of Operation. You gotta reach those tweezers right in there. Don't touch anything wrong. Nicely done. That's how the professionals do it, folks. Fantastic. All right, so now we got our, I think, all of our inside parts. We're not gonna add the little bud, right? We're gonna keep it to the 2 flowers. Got one in each window, so that's perfect. We'll have a great view on the inside. So while they get set up for the next edition, we'll just do a little heat maintenance, making sure the punny's staying warm enough, making sure the lip is stable. Okay. So how are we doing on questions out there? Anybody got any more curiosities? No? We're in the middle of spring break here at the Corning Museum of Glass, so there's lots of extra activities going on. And I know on Wednesday we're going to be doing a You Design It. It's one of my favorite projects that we do here at the Corning Museum of Glass because it gives us a chance to do something fun and ridiculous, kind of like what we're doing here today. Just something creative, something unusual that you might want to see out of glass. It's actually looking pretty warm. So I think they're going to start cutting in some of the texture. A lot of our parts and pieces have these seams on them that are meant to look like the metal that's been overlapped and pieced together with rivets. And so John will start carving in some of the details. We've got at least 2 different doors that make kind of looking components or parts that are going to be incised in. And he's got a knife. It looks like maybe he's recarved a little bit, resharpened just slightly. No, it came like that. Fantastic. Ooh, a Japanese knife from World War II, he said. But this is one of those perfect examples of finding an object and figuring out what it might be good for your glass-making adventures. So I think Minhi is working on what would be the connection for the door, right? We're going to wrap a bit of glass around that opening because we want to have the window that goes onto it. We want it to look like it is sitting in like a gasket. You know, if you're going up into space, you got to make sure everything's nice and tight and no air holes anywhere. So we want all of this to look like it has been constructed and compiled together with rivets and gaskets and all the different components. Here's that tiny little copper tube that he's acquired to create these rivets on the surface. And it's these little details that really bring this kind of work to life. You know, we would have still read it as a spaceship of some sort with the rockets on the bottom. But by adding all these little mechanical looking components, it really brings it up a notch. Now, one thing about having a lot of different tools, though, is you do kind of have to keep track of them. And I see that he's got a wood handle on the far end of that tube, which is a really smart addition. Because if you just have a copper tube, you might touch, set it down. Then when you go to grab it, maybe grab the wrong end of it if you set it down the wrong way or something. And that's one of a common way for burns to happen in a hot shop is just grabbing a tool that maybe was too hot and you didn't realize, or touching a pipe that you didn't realize was too hot. All right, they're going to go for that big wrap. Beautiful. Very nicely done. You got to get just the right amount of glass, just the right heat, just the right setup to have such a beautiful wrap happen like that. Oh. So while they're getting the details put together for this connection, Chris has already picked up that big window I see over on the small bench. Now we've got these puntied up against the face of the window, and so he also is kind of cutting in a much smaller, tighter connection to make sure that it'll break off nice and easily. We don't want to have to be banging or being too aggressive in removing any of these parts because those punties are pretty delicate. They're meant to be delicate and temporary and break with just a nice little smack or vibration. So there he goes, nice tight line, and now he'll start heating just the lip. We don't want the whole thing moving, we just want the parts that are going to touch each other to be nice and hot. All right, getting ready to stick that window on. That'll recap this piece, essentially creating a nice sealed bubble again. Perfect fit. Nice. Precision. All right, so now we've got the window. We still got to clean up that little nub. And then we also have some of the conduit, the control boxes, some other additions, and of course our rockets that need to go onto the bottom of this as well. Luckily, we're only about halfway through our time frame here. We got till 4 o'clock to finish this piece. So now we're going to do some additional maintenance, getting those seams to really melt in. He might go back in and do some texture, making it look like rivets around that opening as well. The final aesthetic is really up to John and Minhi, and they have, of course, this master plan. But a lot of things happen as you're building a piece that you might start to recognize little adjustments that you want to make this into the final piece. Maybe new decorative elements that you kind of notice as they're coming together that you want to help feature a little bit better. Oh, what a great view inside. We can see that beautiful flower. Those are bright yellow, kind of sunflower looking flowers on the inside. A lot of our colors never look themselves while they're hot. It really have to wait till things get back down to room temperature to see their true nature. So for anyone who might have joined us a little bit late, this is John Sharvin in Minhi, England, contestants from Blown Away Season 3. There's been 3 seasons of Blown Away and a Christmas special. Definitely worth checking out if you're not familiar. It is on Netflix. It's a competition series that goes through 10 different challenges, and of course, one person eliminated every challenge. We all know the format. There seems to be tons of shows that are kind of working in that format these days. But really exciting to see glassmaking as part of that new adventure. We've seen a great uptick in attendance here at the Corning Museum of Glass with your interest in glassmaking and our involvement with Blown Away. We've got a featured display if you come to visit here in person. We've got one piece from each contestant from Season 3 up on our West Bridge. So you can see some of those fantastic pieces, including John has the Oh, what's the animal's name that you made up there, the gray one? Blanking. Well, the walrus, thank you. He's got the walrus. It's just been such a fantastic addition, and we've used it for some of our billboards and stuff, but I think it's one of the more popular pieces that came out of that season, and we've got that right here on display. We also have the display of the final exhibition piece up there, so I don't want to necessarily say who in case you haven't seen all of season 3, but we've got that final winning object on display here at the museum as well, which is the first year that that's happened. So we're really honored and excited to be able to display exactly what brought home that winning, blown away champion here at the Corning Museum of Glass. But our shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass feature artwork made custom for us by many contestants from a few different seasons of Blown Away. So you definitely want to check out both in-house if you want to come and visit the shops, or of course online. We have a really great display or listing online of John and Minhi's work. Minhi has made a series of beautiful flowers during her shops event on Sunday. So those will eventually, she was experimenting with some new color combinations, different than what you might see online currently. But all of those items will be available for sale, as this sculpture will. If everything works out well, we will hopefully put this into our shops and available. So if you're interested, contact us. Get it on a waiting list for who might be eligible to purchase that amazing piece. And John's made a series of beautiful cups using graphite molds that he custom made himself. And those are also available online and in our shops. And all the ones that they made over the weekend, it'll take some time to get things cold worked and priced and put into the shops. But everything that's been made with this shops hosted event will be for sale in our right here in-house or online. But now removing that little nub that helped us transfer this piece onto it, now we can start to really smooth out that window and get the best view to the inside of this sculpture. Do you want to cool it? This is a pad of newspaper that John's using to help smooth out that window. Now, since we left a hole that goes all the way through, we do have the ability to add a little air pressure in there if needed. But in general, as the glass softens, it also rounds up. So we can use just the natural tendencies of the material to help smooth it out. But that newspaper soaked in a little water creates a nice little layer of steam between the tool and the glass and allows us to really smooth and shape out that window beautifully without leaving any tool marks or other aggressive things, like if we were to use a cold paddle or a graphite. We want to get a good view of that flower in the final iteration of this piece, because that's kind of the main theme behind the inspiration to this piece was based on the NASA mission launched in 2015, which successfully grew its first flower blossom on that expedition, rather. Minhi works a lot with flowers in her personal work. And I know Katie and I are both avid gardeners, love all the garden talk this time of year. So it's really fun to come in and make some flowers out of glass. The peonies and the introspective flowers that Minhi has made, they're just so lovely. And the online pictures are great, but seeing them in person is a whole whole nother realm. So highly suggest you come and visit in person here at the Corning Museum of Glass to see some of this beautiful work from this very talented couple of folks here. Yes, you got a question? Yeah, how often has John and Minhi collaborated? I don't know that exact answer, but I know that since meeting at Blown Away, they were both contestants, and then there's a show in Pittsburgh right now that they collaborated on some work. So I think that their collaboration has been growing over the course of the last year since that show came online. And I think that's fairly common in glassmakers. You know, you meet some people, you start to get along, you start to collaborate, you kind of marry your ideas. But their work is very different from each other. And I think this is such a lovely combination of both of those aesthetics and their personal language that are kind of marrying together into this collaborative work. But yes, as a handful of times, I would say it would be my guess, and I'm sure it's going to continue in the future. Now, the tricky part of collaboration is location. And John is based in Pittsburgh, and then Minhi is based in Seattle. So it's kind of a rare opportunity to be able to get together and collaborate. But I know the two of them and John Moran, who was also on the show, the three of them were working together in Pittsburgh and did some collaborative work there as well. John, we also hosted recently and has some featured things in our shops as well. But we're getting a lot of people coming from Blown Away. And I think that having exposure to Blown Away has also changed a lot of lives. With every contestant I've talked to, they say, well, you know, I was popular before, but now, man, I cannot, my phone won't stop ringing, my online is booming, my sales are doing good, I'm getting invited all over the country to do workshops and residencies and all kinds of things. So it's really fantastic to see artists who have such great talent that maybe just never had that stage to be able to be featured. And now not only the show, but here at the museum, we're also giving that stage for them to be able to develop new work, bend that creativity, and really push that career into the next step. Especially with the prevalence of social media these days and all of the ways that we can kind of see the inside life of a lot of artists. It's sort of a new thing in the glass world, but it's become a really important one and a good relationship to have because you can chat with people online. We're doing it right here. People can tag in questions live here while we're talking. And so reaching a more of a broad audience, an international audience, has really helped the glass world in general. I know here at the museum we've seen quite an impressive uptick in our attendance because of the interest in Blown Away and the exhibits that we put on display. We had a really big crowd for the residency last week in attendance, so people coming specifically to see our guest artists from Blown Away. And that's happened every year that we've hosted those folks. And of course, the shop sales have also been really great, featuring many of those artists. A local one being Cat Burns. If you've seen season 2 in the Christmas special, Cat Burns is a local artist and has made a lot of work here locally. All right, so what are we adding next? All right, I think we're going to start adding our outside components now. We made a couple, oh, there's our plain box. We got a couple different boxes. So they would look like control boxes, oxygen boxes. They could be any number of things. We were affectionately calling them space junk earlier when we were talking about their assemblage and how this would come together. So spot heating just that very specific place. You want that door or the other door? You okay? right, so we got one box. Now this one's a simple box. This one doesn't have any of that carving. You can see that beautiful door that he kind of drew onto the side of it. But some of these components have those incised texture and some of them don't. But one thing that he does with a lot of this work is he'll go back in and sprinkle powder on top and then wipe it off the surface. And then that powder settles into the recesses of those textures and gives more of a kind of a highlight, kind of like a object sitting on your shelf for too long, collects a little dust and starts to show its highlights of all those textures. Do you have a question? What are we making? So we are making a collaborative sculpture that is a spaceship that also has flowers inside of it. And it's inspired by a 2015 NASA exploration where they went up into space and grew the first flower bud successfully in space. So only the first step to feeding ourselves as we travel around the universe. Yeah, very exciting. But Minhi does a lot of flowers in her work, so this is really bringing their two concepts together into one. So Chris has got the next control box. Give them a good flash. Anytime we pull things out of the garage, we always give them just a little bit of heat in that reheating chamber to make sure that they're as hot as possible. It's a delicate balance of getting things hot without getting them moving. If they get too hot, they'll stick to that paddle that he's using. If they're too cold, they might end up breaking. So it's important to keep them in just the right temperature. Beautiful. So now we've got our boxes. Now we've also got some conduit that was made. So it's just like little sausages that they incise different constriction lines along the form. And once we get all these parts onto the object itself, we still have yet to punty it one more time. We need to transfer it off of that iron because where the iron is stuck right now is where we want the jet propulsion to come from the bottom, the jet packs on the bottom. So we still have one more transfer to do. It's like we're sharpening up some of those details. You can see he's got that carving knife. He's got a larger pipe that he was using, copper. Copper can be a really great shaping tool, but copper also gets hot really easy. It is also one of the metals that is somewhat compatible with our glass, meaning if we do have copper components that are added in, they expand and contract at a very similar rate to our glass. If you add other metals like stainless steel into a piece and it contacts it, it's going to expand and contract at a different rate and can cause stress and cracks to form in that piece eventually. Uh-oh. We got Miss Hubs online asking us why we haven't used the fluffy torch on the bottom of the piece anytime frequently. It's Katie's mom. She's always one of our biggest fans. Hi, Katie's mom. Good to see you. But yes, we haven't used the torch on the bottom, but we're also keeping a keen eye on those temperatures. So we use the torch when we need it to warm up a little bit, keeping that punty a little hot. And we have been using it on occasion, but at the moment, I think everything's just the right temperature. Look at that beautiful detail. Whew. It's like a little space radio or something there on the Sputnik. Love it. But yes, we're probably about due for a punty warm, so thank you for that reminder. And we'll get back in there and doing some heat maintenance. We'll torch the punty just for Katie's mom. That's great. Thank you. And for us, yes. Yeah, if that punty starts to get too cold, if any one part of this piece starts to get too cold, it could start to have a crack. And cracks might stay in one place or they might travel elsewhere. Or if the punty in general gets too cold, we do run the risk if it's set down a little too hard or we're torquing on it a little bit, it could just break right at that punty. So keeping those temperatures are really important. So if you see a little bit of color in that punty, then you're usually pretty fine. You don't want to have it moving a lot while you're trying to build the sculpture because you don't want to get things way off center and then try to recenter them. So it's a delicate balance, finding just the right temperature to keep it from cracking and to keep it from moving. All right, sounds like we want to do one of the squiggles now. So these are like the cords, the conduit that would run from one box to another box. Now we've also got this really fun tool, and I need to get a pair of these myself, but they are grabbers. They're kind of like little fingers. They got two on one side, one on the other. So as they clasp around things, they're really great for holding on to objects. And we don't reheat them with our, but it's just a great way to grab a component, have it nice and secure in your hand, so that then you can use your torch to spot heat it and then touch it down where it needs to be contacted. So we're going to contact it and then go for some flashes and then marry the other part. When you're assembling a piece like this, all the caliper measurements in the world might only take you so far. There's always little components that need a little extra adjustment. And so instead of having the exact measurement, we have a close measurement. And now we can assemble that together a little bit easier. Teamwork. So we can use that glow that's starting to form to really inform us on what the temperatures are of our glass. But different colors will react differently to heat. We can use cork blocks. These are really great tools to help push the glass around. They have a less likelihood of shocking the glass. A lot of our metal tools, of course, might be a little cold. And if you're using a small contact to touch something with, you might end up leaving a tool mark on that object as well. So cork is a pretty inert material. It's not going to be hot, it's not going to be cold, and if as long as you kind of keep it moving, it never leaves a tool mark either. Adding a little bit more air pressure. Just trying to round up all the forms, making sure everything is perfect before we transfer this off of this iron. We want to be on that last punty for a very brief amount of time, just enough to put the 3 rockets on there. When you've got all these different parts and pieces together, it's kind of hard to get the temperatures just where you want them if you want to reshape something. So they spin a few heats, kind of building up those temperatures, letting other areas cool down. But irregularity fixed. Beautiful. So we're just adding in all those little rivets that hold the window into the vessel, that whole gasket area. I think this is at least the 3rd copper pipe size I've seen. So lots of options to choose from. And you'll notice how he's kind of heating the area he's going to next in the way that they're turning the pipe and everything.
There's a lot of different rivets in the Space Depot.
Yeah, there is a lot of different rivets in the Space Depot. Moon Depot? Well, then you'd have to go to the moon to get, so how do you get the things from the moon? Elevator? Nice.
Amazon Super Prime?
All right, so letting that detail set up, do a little maintenance on here. Then I think we've got at least one more conduit to add. All right, one more conduit to be added. A little discussion on where and how that would be attached. Just getting that glass just hot enough to start deforming. Pushing it into place. And every kind of glass that you work with acts a little bit differently. So this is a glass product that John and Minhi haven't really worked with before. So when you change those chemistries, you change the way the glass acts. So some of the timing, some of the heating, everything changes just a little bit depending on the kind of glass that you're using. I think that might be the last component that we have in our oven, except for those jet packs. Or what do you call it? Jet engines? I don't know. Rockets? Boosters. That's probably the most accurate term because I'm not calling it the right thing. Boosters. So Chris is getting all the other parts moved over to the hot side, everything all ready. All right, so we're about finished with the detailing. We're just going to give it a couple of flashes of heat, build up some heat in that punty, and then we're going to transfer this over onto another punty. Right now, where the current punty is connected is where we're going to put all those boosters. I see some feverish powder adjustments happening, so we might end up sprinkling a little powder onto the surface of this before we do that final transfer as well. All right, so we're going to sprinkle some of that powder into those details. They've got a rag so they can wipe it off the surface so it'll just settle into the recesses, really bringing out the highlights of all those rivets and other components that were added in. Even any residual powder that doesn't get rubbed off will just make it look like it's been hurtling through space. Give it a little extra decoration on the outside of that form. We have a powder booth to kind of contain the dust from that powder as well. Those powders are made from silica-based glass and a lot of metals, so we want to try to avoid too much of that exposure. We use sifters to be able to sift this. You can buy this powdered glass in a really fine powder, anywhere from like a sea salt kind of granular effect. And each kind of particle size will give you a slightly different effect. So the bigger the grain, the bigger the polka dot. And the more polka dots that blend together, that gives you more of a even or uneven texture, whether it's visual or physical. But by adding powder at a late stage like this, we might not melt in. It might not have the heat to have all those little particles melted in. So it might leave just a little bit of a physical tooth or texture to the final product. Like everything we do, timing is really critical. And so having these late stages of additions of powder really bring the surface lovely. Great video shot there. You can see how it just wipes right away, but stays in those recesses. So now we've managed to get all our highlights taken care of. So now we'll just do, again, a little heat maintenance. Might cut that jack line that we currently have down a little bit tighter. You don't want it too delicate and fragile while you're working on the piece, but to get it to break, you want it to be the weakest spot. Glass will always break wherever it is the weakest. So we need to make that jack line as tight as we can get it. They're discussing where they might want to add this punty. Since this punty will be a physical texture on the surface, they'll eventually want to get in and do some cold working, hopefully removing that texture from the surface. So giving it a little thought about where it's located, where you can get easily accessible once the object is cold. All this pre-planning really makes a big difference in the final success of the piece. All right, so we recognize, it's a pro move, recognize that the temperatures just weren't ideal. So instead of pushing it and maybe making a fatal error, we're just taking another reheat, rebalancing temperatures. Cutting in a new jack line on the new punty will leave a little bit of glass on the surface of this object. Then we can cold work it back down to the surface and keep all of our color, keep all of our parts. So it looks like they might try to remove some of the original punty. This is where the rocket or the boosters are going to be attached. And this is where those torches come in so invaluable, being able to warm up only that little extra glass. You want me to leave the other one closed then?
Yeah, you can close one medium, one and keep it.
Okay. Okay. You want me to take flashes? Yeah, I can either reheat or take a bit.
It'll take 3 off this.
Okay.
One, yeah, that's that shape.
Okay. Thanks, kid. All right, so adding a couple more details. We're also discussing the game plan for the next process. In order to add these rockets, they're a little bit bigger, they're a little bit thicker. So we need to make sure that they're just the right temperature, warming up just a little bit more than we might have some of the other components. And we're going to use a glue bit to join these together. We've got options when we go to join things together. If they're just torched and hot melted together, that's one thing. Otherwise, we can use glass itself to act like glue, taking small bits from a feeder bit and adding that to the component. Do you need a door open for this flash? Okay. Good. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay.
They're gonna go turn, like 1, 2, 3.
And you're cutting them, I'm just delivering them, right? Okay. Is it stopped up now? Okay. Okay. How we doing on those doors? You need another door? Okay. All right. All right, so that first one went smoothly. We're getting set up for another round. Part of that maintenance that Chris has been doing so excellently in our garage is to keep everything organized, getting everything close to the heat that he knows is the next pieced up. And these are kind of roly-poly, he said, so he's being really careful with that oven. Okay. I'm going to open this here, if you don't mind. We're all just waiting for the timing, the signal. Yep. And there's not one, there's not two, but there's 3 boosters. Really bringing us up into space. So we got one more to add. Now, in the process of getting all the parts and pieces together, we actually made a few spares. When you're working on a project like this and you've got all this assembly, if for some reason one of the objects maybe would crack in the oven or drop or something unexpected might happen, it really would be difficult to remake that in the moment. So we often add a little extra. Using those grabbers, those are such great tools. It's probably the most secure grip you'll have on grabbing hold of glass like that. But I think that deserves a big round of applause. Great teamwork. John Sharvin, Minhi, England, they've been orchestrating all of this work coming together. This is a collaborative of the 2 of them working together. The flower components being part of Minhi's collection of her personal work and aesthetic. John's influence is this beautiful space pod inspired by the 2015 first NASA mission that launched a successful flower blossom in space. It's part of the inspiration for this piece. But now we've got all the parts. We just want to make sure everything is in its perfect position and placement. So a couple reheats. You can see John is working on those joints to be able to flex them to make sure all the boosters are in the right position. I already see Chris getting ready to put away this piece. He's getting on the protective gear, a face mask, heat protective gloves. And we're in this upper one, right? Just want to check which side. Left side. Also part of the team today, Katie Hubbs, doing an excellent job on all those reheats here today. Chris Rochelle, amazing orchestrator of the garage. Got Jason and Brad on all this wonderful filming. Alexis up in the booth. It's fantastic. Eric Meek jumped out to help us here with the doors right there at the end. It's always good to have a little extra hand when things are getting critical. Sounds like we're going to add just a little bit more powder, a little more accents. Some of the discussion we had earlier today, they said, well, we're not quite sure about the timing. We've never made this piece before. So if it gets to be where we're under time, we'll add more detail. If it gets to be where we're over time, we'll take away some detail. And we got a good 12 minutes to spare. So they got plenty of time to add those final little details in a sculpture. So highlighting some of those high spots, those low spots, adding this extra layer of detail really, I think, just brings this thing to life. Really showing kind of the history of it, catapulting through space, getting hit by little space rocks and such. And even the dark of the afterburn and all of those boosters. It's lovely. Oh, that's a great view. You can see all the rivet marks on our pieces and components too. Those little copper tubing just pushed into the center makes it look like little rivets. So we will be taking, documenting pictures of this and putting it on the end of the live stream video that will eventually be on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and rewatch all the highlights from this fantastic piece. This is also potentially going to be for sale in our shop. So if you're interested in acquiring this piece, you want to reach out to our shops here at the Corning Museum of Glass. And if all goes well, that will hopefully be up for sale online. But you definitely want to also check out all of Minhi, England, and John Sharvin's work, not only on their personal websites, but also here at the shops. You've got one window open on your computer, open another one. Check out our shops. There's lots of things for sale there from local, regional artists and featured objects like the specialty pieces that were made exclusively for the Corning Museum of Glass through these shops and sponsored events. I know that over the weekend, Minhi was experimenting with some unique color combinations for her peonies that doesn't exist yet. So we're really excited to see those come out of the oven and possibly a whole new line of work for us here at the museum. When you get down to the final moments of a piece like this, it's really all about balancing temperatures. We want to make sure that those last components have set up, the old components are not getting too cold, and then we're going to load this right away into our annealing oven where it'll cool down over at least 24-hour cycle. The thicker the glass, the longer you want to let it cool, especially with all the parts and pieces, giving it plenty of time to be able to shrink together. Since our glass expands and contracts as it heats and it cools, if uneven shrinking causes problems. So this will be in a nice slow cycle that'll allow it to cool down at a rate where all the parts will shrink together. What are you doing? Oh, nice. So they're gonna, since we've got so many colors that are reactive to a reduction atmosphere, we can reduce the surface of our reheating chamber. You can see already getting real gassy in there, and that'll just bring some of that metallic. Whew, there we go. Good call, Chris. Good call. Made it metallic, bringing it to life. Little water on that connection. Light tap. Beautiful. We're going to torch that little spot just to make sure there's nothing sharp, and then it'll go away in our oven for that safekeeping. And we hold our applause. There it is, safe and sound. Let's get a big round of applause. Minhi, England, John Sharvin, amazing team. Thank you so much for coming in person. Thank you so much for tuning in online. We hope you answered all of your questions that we had online, but it's been a joy to be with you. It's been a joy to have these folks, and I do hope to come to have you come and visit in person, see some of this amazing work in person here at the museum. But otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.